Going to talk about raising resilient kids and trying to understand essentially what behavior is trying to tell us. First of all, let's see, who am I? So, my name is Amy Sage. I have been a school counselor for nearly 20 years, working with kids TK through high school and then also at the college level. I have two kids of my own. One is actually tomorrow's their last day. So, I have an almost eighth grader and an almost sophomore. I have a daughter and a son. And Ronnie is pictured in this. Ronnie Nokan is also in this picture with me because she and I created initially the parenting EQ, which is all about building emotional skills so that learning and family life just goes easier overall. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. And so the objectives today are really to talk about a new way to understand children's behavior in general, looking into how big emotions and perceptions can shape reactions and their behaviors, and then leaving with some simple strategies if there's any kids in your life that can help them cope and to thrive. So the most important thing is starting with where are kids' brains at? What is happening to them? And the main thing I always tell parents is that the brain is under construction. And so until they're about 25, the prefrontal cortex, this prefrontal cortex in the beginning, this logical part of your brain is completely under construction. And it doesn't mean that kids aren't able to think logically or rationally or anything like that, but we just do have to understand that it is severely underdeveloped. And the emotional brain of kids actually develops first. And if you look at, I'm going to show you a hand model to kind of illustrate what that looks like. There is a UCLA psychologist who his name is Dr. Dan Siegel, and he coined the term flipping your lid. He also is an author, and he wrote many books. One of them pretty famous is The Whole Brain Child. And so he kind of used the hand model to describe what is actually happening in our kids' brain. So this is the prefrontal cortex, right in the beginning here. This is the logic reasoning part of the brain. And then underneath, when the lid is flipped, underneath is the amygdala, which is that emotional part of the brain, the fight, flight, or freeze. And this part of the brain has kept us safe for many, 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 many thousands of years. And we want it to work like this because if you are, let's say, in a fire or if an animal is coming at you or something like that, you don't want to stop and think about it. You want this thinking part of the brain to basically flip open, and you want to be purely in the emotional part of your brain because you're going to fight, you're going to run. Freezing might not always be good. Sometimes, it ends up saving people as well, but we want our emotional brain to do that because that is just a built-in safety. But what is happening is that true emergencies don't just cause kids' lids to flip anymore. It could be something simple, for younger kids, like you cut the crust off wrong, or they're in a fight with their sibling, or another student, or, they can't, there's a challenging math assignment, something like that. And so now all of a sudden their lids are flipped. It's easy to see in like toddlers when they're throwing themselves on the ground and kicking and yelling and having a full meltdown. You can see that the thinking part of the brain, whatever is developed, is not working. They're just purely in this emotional state. And so we're just remembering when we're looking at kids' behaviors and we're trying to understand what's going on, it's not that kids won't learn or won't listen or won't try to problem solve and make it better. It's when they're overwhelmed, they literally cannot. And this also is the same for adults. We flip our lids and it just looks a lot different than a toddler throwing a tantrum, but there's many times where I'm in a full conversation with one of my children and I recognize this is not going well. But I am digging in because I have a really important point to make, and it is going to be wisdom that they are going to hold on to forever. And none of that is true, but I will not stop because in my mind, this is the best course, but really my lid is flipped. And so it's really important to see it in our children, the children we may be caretakers of, and then to also recognize and see it in ourselves. So that's the first thing is, that's happening in our kids' brain. Then we take a look at our perception. So, perception is reality, our own reality. And so, we can look at the same situation as someone else and we can have a different experience. So, for instance, one person sees that this is a 9, the other person sees that this is a 6. Who's correct? They're both correct. So, both things can be true, even if people are experiencing it in very different ways. And so, how your child is feeling is going to impact their perception and also their behavior. So if they're in like a low stress area, if they're not upset, if their lid is not flipped, they're flexible, they can be calm, they can maybe be more focused. But if you put that same child in a high stress, if they're, if there's other things going on with them, they can be more reactive, they can be overwhelmed, they can be stuck in that moment. So the same child, different state. So first we got the brain is under construction, then we have our perception of what's happening. And you see this a lot with kids when they feel that people are intentionally hurting them or are, negative towards them or don't like them, then they're immediately jump to their own perception of what they think is happening. And then you might have heard or seen kind of the iceberg picture to help describe what the behavior looks like. So behavior is a form of communication. And so we only typically see the very tip of the behavior, the meltdowns, the disrespect, the eye rolling, the door slamming, the who knows whatever else. What we're not seeing is what's going on underneath the surface. So did they not sleep very well last night? Did they have a nightmare they keep thinking about? Are they struggling, with a friend at school? Are they hungry? What are they just feeling sad? Are they have a fear of something? Like what is happening all underneath this iceberg? And most of the time, especially kids, they don't necessarily know that these things are happening, but they just know that they're reacting to them. And so we see the tip. And again, as adults, we are also having a million things going on, stressors and worries and things that are consuming, under our iceberg here. And we're thinking about things and we're doing things. And so our behavior is also a reflection of that as well. So instead of asking, what's wrong with this child? It's more about asking, what is my child trying to tell me? But because behavior feels so personal, we usually react in different ways. And as a school counselor for so many years, it was very easy to see kids, throwing things and arguing with teachers and having a hard time with, other students and recognizing, oh, they're lacking some skills. They don't know how to handle this situation, as opposed to, oh, they're just not able to express or understand what's happening to them. But just like if we're trying to teach math or reading or something like that, we wouldn't take it so personal if someone didn't understand a math problem or weren't able to read. We would teach it in a different way. We would practice it. We would do a lot of other things. But because behavior feels like they're doing it intentionally to us, we usually react in a more negative way. So parenting is not just about managing behavior. It's more about building the skills. If we want to see better behavior, we have to teach the skills that make that possible. And so what kind of skills can we teach to help with behavior? Well, this is when talking about emotional intelligence is helpful. You've probably heard of IQ versus EQ and emotional intelligence. So IQ is measuring that cognitive reasoning, the memory, those types of like logic and reasoning skills and so forth. It's thought to be more linked to genetics and relatively set. Where emotional intelligence is different because it's defined as an individual's ability to identify, evaluate, control, and express emotions. So allows someone to recognize how they're feeling so they can express it, so they can calm themselves down, and they can work together with other people. And it can be learned at any age, at any time. It just requires the awareness to learn it and the practice. And it includes 5 main competencies. So self-awareness or emotional awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. So if we'll delve a little bit more into what those look like. So self-awareness, just the ability to identify our emotions and how they impact our thoughts and behaviors. And so again, if I'm in a good mind frame and I'm having a good day, then my thoughts and my behaviors are probably going to be more positive versus if I'm in a poor mood and I'm going to let some negative things influence me. We're able to see emotions are complex. They change over time. It's not the best day ever. It's not the worst day ever. It can change. And that it plays a role in our decision making. Self-regulation is the ability to control your emotions. It doesn't mean don't have emotions, especially negative ones. It means just basically being able to control it. And it's really about taking a pause. So instead of reacting to something, which usually doesn't always end up as well as we'd like it to be, we do a pause and we respond. And so then we can refrain from acting impulsively, which helps us make better decisions. Motivation is the drive to set goals and act on opportunities, to stick with it when things get challenging. For kids, we talk about building their growth mindset. Opportunity mistakes are opportunities to grow. It takes practice to get better. It's okay not to be, perfect at something the first time around. We want to build that growth mindset. Empathy is being aware of the feelings of others. This is being able to see different perspectives. You can put yourself in someone else's shoes and be aware of how other people are feeling and thinking. And then social skills. This is how we communicate, how do we solve problems, and how do we work with individuals and groups. And so why is EQ important and matter for learning? Well, it helps in all of these areas. It helps improve academics because if you can handle negative emotions such as anxiety, frustration, even boredom, you're going to be able to focus better. You'll have better coping, more resilience, and better problem solving. It overall improves behaviors because when you have low levels of stress and anxiety, which mean an increase in like usually mental health and your overall well-being, and then when you have higher levels of empathy, cooperation, conflict skills, you have better positive relationships with your peers. There's not as much conflict. And then there's this long-lasting impact. So in 1990, Dan Goldman wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence. And so since then, there's been 30 plus years of research. And it shows that, even as adults, that people are likely to make healthier life choices if they have been building these different areas of their emotional intelligence. And this includes lower rates of substance abuse, healthier eating habits, better stress, because they've learned positive ways to cope, to recognize what's happening with them, and to learn some self-regulation skills. And employers value EQ over IQ. They'll promote a high EQ candidate. I always think about, I worked with many different personalities in the schools, and one of them, she was very, very, very intelligent, and she helped run one of our schools, and you would never doubt that she was very smart and knew what she was talking about. And so you would say she had a very high IQ, but she had a very low EQ. She was quick to anger. She was condescending. She was difficult to communicate with. She was just a difficult person to work with. And so those would be the people who would say, like, she really knew her stuff, but she just was so difficult to be along with. And so that's a lot of when we call them now, or we used to call them soft skills and life skills. It's like sometimes people say it's harder to teach those skills. They can teach you the ins and outs of a job, but they want people who can get along with others. But we can teach those. We just have to like directly teach them. And that's what we're going to talk about is how we can teach them. So if you're looking at, maybe you have a kid in mind that you're like, maybe they're lacking some skills. And so what kinds of skills would you here we start with looking at what are the behaviors looking like, because again, those are the tip of the iceberg. So if you're seeing big emotions, anxieties and big worries, meltdowns and tantrums, big reactions to small problems, maybe you're seeing defiance, disrespect, talking back, depending on the age level. So it's going to start with building that self-awareness, which is, what am I feeling right now? How do I know that I'm feeling that? How do I name it? And then that self-regulation, how do I calm myself down? That's basically the lid is flipped. And so nothing productive is going to happen until we recognize that and we get that lid back on. If you see a child that gives up easily or rushes through the work, or the opposite, they're perfectionists, they can't ever let it go, they keep correcting things, they have that negative self-talk, that's going to fall under our motivation and confidence. And so we're looking at self-awareness, self-regulation. How am I feeling? How do I calm myself down? And then the motivation, specifically the growth mindset, learning from opportunities, and it's okay to keep trying and working through all that. And then social challenges, if they have difficulty making friends or have lots of conflicts even within the home, if they're physical, and if they blame others, we're going to look at self-awareness and self-regulation. How do I feel? How do I calm down? And then specifically teaching social skills, social cues, problem solving, and then empathy as well. All right. So as you can see, the theme is first regulate, then educate. Regulation and focus use the same brain system. So if a child can't regulate, they're not going to focus, they're not going to learn, they're not going to be able to problem solve. And so when you practice those regulation, those calming strategies, it actually in turn helps kids with that focus. Everyone, can think of kids who maybe have a few letters. They might be diagnosed with hyperactivity or attention deficit. And always, what can I do? What can I do for my kid? It's all going to start with they have to know how they're feeling and they have to be able to calm down because that's going to be the essence of getting them to slow their body down and to really start to focus. And again, this also is applicable for adults as well. We need to be regulated as well to help us focus, to help us problem solve. Same kind of idea with the flipped lid. So, since we are the first and greatest teachers for the kids in our lives, as a parent or caregiver, it does matter how you show up more than your strategy. You can say all the right things, you can do all the right things, but if you come in with this hot energy that is just obviously elevated, if your lid is flipped or you're not, or you're distracted, even, the kids are going to feel it. They mirror our emotions. And so when we slow our breath, when we lower our voice, when we even go down to their level, depending how old they are, the child's nervous system will feel it too. So calm is contagious, but so is chaos. So it's always important to remember. And I just thought I found these two quotes one day and I just thought it was kind of telling. So two things, self-regulation for adults. So the next time you lock horns with your child, tempers are flaring, remember this. It's likely a head-on collision of both parent and child not feeling seen or heard in that moment. And as the adult with more resources, more power, it's our job to recognize this, remove the ego, that's usually the flip lid. And so we can parent from a place of calm, curiosity, and compassion. And so before you yell, kind of thinking, taking that pause and saying, what is making me so angry about this? Am I taking it personally? How can I look at this situation differently? Do I really know what's happening? Am I just assuming stuff? And what does my child need right now? And what do I need? Because, as much as kids have all this stuff going under the iceberg, adults usually have a lot more about what our fear is, fear of what our kids, they think of our child, or what are people going to say, or what are people going to, and so ours kind of comes from our own fear that sometimes we flip our lid and have a bigger reaction than is really going to be productive. Okay, so real quick, let's talk about how do we develop self-awareness and self-regulation, because we know that is the foundation of everything. And it really comes down to just normalizing all feelings. All feelings are okay. It's what we do with them that matters. And in today's day and age, negative feelings, uncomfortable feelings get a bad rap. You're supposed to be happy all the time. You're supposed to see all these people on social media doing all these amazing things, and you're supposed to do the same and never feel sad and never feel upset and never feel, and that's not true. Uncomfortable feelings are actually clues to what's going on inside of us. We don't want to shove them down because they will eventually come out in a way that we don't want, in a place where we're not really don't want it to be if we have a choice. And so instead of shoving them down, we have to learn to sit with them. And when we know that if we sit with them, they will pass, we just have to kind of, and give kids the space to do that as well. And when we pay attention to our feelings, we can start to make that connection between how we're feeling and how that leads to what our reactions, our behaviors are. And for kids, that gives them a lot of control over themselves, especially kids who feel like all these things are being done to them. They're 0 to 60, they're in a big explosion, and now they're in trouble. Everyone is mad at them, and they always feel like the spotlight is on them. And so when kids start to see that if they can pause, if they can take a step back, if they can get that lid back on, that they have more control, and it's really empowering. Also, when along with feelings and self-awareness, if when you start to focus on self-awareness, is actually how you teach empathy. I know a lot of times people get worried that their kids don't demonstrate or have enough empathy, but it has to start with them feeling validated first. They're not going to be able to recognize feelings in other people or willing to address feelings with other people if they don't feel like they've been validated themselves. So that's why it starts with, I hear you, I notice your frustration. frustrated, all that kind of stuff. But then you can help them see, now look at what somebody else is looking like, or how are they reacting, and what do you think they're feeling? But it has to start with them feeling that validation as well. But overall, the goal is not to eliminate emotions. Emotions are really big indicators to what we think is fair. For a lot of kids, it's going to lead to what their passions could be later on, maybe future careers based on, things that they really enjoy. And so we want to notice those emotions. We want to recognize them and teach them how to manage them, but not eliminate them. And the most important thing, if you remember only one thing from this whole presentation, it's practicing how to learn to be aware of our feelings and calm down before it matters. Because we build these skills in those calm moments when your lid is not flipped so that they're available in the hard moments. You would never teach or tell a kid, here, you're going to go do a piano recital right now. Just go right up there and you'll figure it out when you get there, right? We would never do that. We would never take our kids to soccer, basketball practice, and not ever have taught them a basic skill. And so we're thinking the same thing. This is a skill, just like everything else. And so we have to teach them how to take a deep breath, how to take a pause, and we got to keep it light and fun so that they want to do it. And once they practice it a few times, oh, well, this feels good. Now I feel my body feels calm. And so in those big moments, I'm going to want to try that and I'm going to want to do it versus, I have an explosion and someone says to me, calm down, calm down. That's not going to work. We do not have time to talk about these, but I have to throw it out there. Why else are we struggling to self-regulate these days? Well, technology and sleep. This is, again, for children and adults, but those two things are going to severely impact how our children can bounce back and regulate and how we as adults can as well. So it's its own 2-hour, presentation, but I had to just mention it. Okay, do I have any questions so far? Because I'm just going to run through a few practical tools.
Well, what was that hand diagram on that previous page?
Oh, I'm going to talk about it next. This is called Take 5 breathing. It's one of a really simple breathing technique. You breathe in and you breathe out and you breathe in and breathe out. And so kids can start to learn how to take deep breaths and connect it to their body. Good question. I'm going to talk about those next. Okay, so the practical tools to get started. So the first ones are going to be in the moment. And then the second one is going to be how do we build them in that time when we're saying like we need to practice them before you're in that moment. So in that moment, if you see a child who's really frustrated or upset, we just want to name and validate the feeling. I noticed you're feeling frustrated, or that felt really hard. Oh man, that's so tough. I'd feel that way too. Sometimes when our kids, you hear kids saying like, everyone hates me or blah, blah, something like that. We don't want to say things like, no, that's not true, because then what we're telling them is that their feelings aren't, we're not validating that that's how they're feeling. So instead, you could also say things like, I know it feels that way right now. You're not agreeing. You're not saying, yeah, everybody does hate you. You're just saying, I know it feels that way right now. Oof, that seems really hard. Or I notice language is less defensive. I notice you seem really angry. I notice you seem really upset about something, and you kind of just pause and let them. But we don't want to just immediately, a lot of times we jump to like, no, don't say those negative things about yourself, but they're feeling those in the moment. And so we want to validate that. And so we want our kids to feel understood, be able to say those out loud, lower that intensity, build that emotional awareness. Now, to just build it on a regular basis, because first and greatest teachers, any modeling we do is going to be really powerful. And so if you have, or kids who don't like to talk about their feelings, or maybe haven't really had a lot of experience or practice, then you just start talking about your feelings. And the I feel messages are just the easiest way. I felt, really proud when I went and, exercised today, or I felt really frustrated. Somebody cut me off today when I was driving, or, positive and negative stuff. This is also, we use this when kids talk to each other about how they're feeling, like, hey, I felt left out when you didn't, sit with me at lunch. Next time, can I sit with you? Whatever that is. That's what the next time, please, is when we want them to ask them to do something different. Noticing the feelings we're having and how they feel in our bodies. This is good for little kids. A lot of times your family members might feel feelings in the same place you do. So like, for instance, my stomach is always where I feel my nervousness or excitement, and my daughter's the same way. So for a long time, she would always try to get out of school like, oh, I don't feel good, I can't go to school. I'm like, no, that's where our feelings are. Let's talk about those feelings. And so we have this body awareness little activity where it's just this frame of a body, and we talk about, your face gets hot when you're angry, or your fists start clenching, or maybe your heart is racing. And it's just a good way to make that connection so kids understand. It's also very big safety for kids later on. Trusting your gut, like, hey, something felt really off and you don't know why, or why that person made you feel that way, but you don't have to know why. And you don't have to think about it. You don't have to logically think about it. You can just make an excuse and get yourself out of there. So you always want kids to have that awareness to what feels right and feels safe, and when they can just say, hey, something doesn't feel right, and I don't need any permission. I can just get out of that situation. So that's what's really important. And for little kids, it helps them kind of connect how feelings feel in their body. You can do like a regular feeling check-in. These are our feeling puppets, and so they're Velcro, they stick, and then they also can be used as like role-playing puppets. But I have two teenagers, 13 and 15, and sometimes I just throw it on the table in the morning. Like, what are we in for? What mood is everyone waking up in today? Like, don't even talk to me. Just throw like a feeling face so I know what we're in for. So it's just kind of a way to keep feelings like as a regular conversation. We don't just talk about negative feelings, we talk about all kinds of feelings. And then, in all of our products, we always have books and games and activities that just make talking about feelings fun, because we don't need to also be in those big heated moments. We want to learn about different feeling faces. And there's so many kids when I used to counsel at the schools, and I'd say, show me your happy face. And they would make this weird face. And I was like, because they're like, nobody wants to play with me. Like, I'm smiling at everyone. I'm like, that does not look like a smile to me. Let's talk about what a happy face looks like. Let's talk about an approachable face. And so kids need to understand how they come across. So anyways, there's just a different ways you can do it. And then there's also something we call feelings detective, which is just when you're out in the world, it's always kind of fun to pay attention to what's happening and who's having feelings around you. So if you're at a store or restaurant, it's like key, especially a long time ago when I didn't want my kids anywhere near on phones, didn't have devices. We would just be waiting in line forever and be like, oh, what do you think that mom over there is feeling? How can you tell? What do you think those kids over there are feeling? How can you tell? And it's just a good way to talk about body language and tone, and maybe words, and so forth. So you can also do it with videos. You can just pause videos or TV shows and then just let the scene play and then talk about, what do you see happening and what do you think people are feeling? So anyways, those are all ways you can just do it for fun, and you keeping it light and playful. And so now talking about feelings is normal, so that when all of a sudden some bigger, more uncomfortable feeling comes, kids are willing to share. Okay, now let's talk about self-regulation. So once we understand how we're feeling, most likely we're going to need to calm ourselves down to get either that lid back on or just get into a better state before we can solve any of the problems. There's a mantra I have, like, once we're calm, we can solve any problem. But until then, we really need to get ourselves back to that state. And so most of the time, again, depending on how savvy the child is already doing this, or if this is brand new, you're trying to build it into less intense moments. But sometimes it might just start with pair modeling. My daughter at 18 months was having very big emotions. And so I would just literally sit on the floor and just start taking deep breaths in and out. It was as much for me as it was for her. But out over time, she would just come and sit down next to me and start to mimic the breaths. And then when her little brother got a little bit bigger, she would do it with him when he got upset. So even if she wasn't always using it, she was still demonstrating it. And then it just slowly built from there. It's just a more of a like when you know that kid, do they want somebody to touch them and hug them? Do they want to sit with you for a minute? Do they just want you to be near you? You're just trying to get past those heated moments really as quickly as possible. For teenagers, I always say, like, just try to get past that. Everyone get their lid back on. You don't want to damage that relationship. You don't want to keep drilling down because nobody's listening and it's just making everything worse. But then when everyone is calm, you do regular times that you practice and you build it in. So breakfast and dinner, we'd always take big deep breaths, or everybody would be able to say like, hey, show us, like your own little breathing technique. In the car, they're captive audiences. So we would talk about breathing. I do a lot of these presentations for homeschool parents. And so we talk about building them into their transitions of the day. And then they can also create a calm space. So this is a picture of one of the last schools I was at, Design 39 campus in Poway. This was our calm corner. And that was a TK through 8th school. And the kids helped us create it and everything. And we thought for sure that like all the littles would use it, but every lunch, the middle schoolers would just flock to this area and they wanted to sit there and play with it. I want my room to look like this and all this. And it was so funny. And one of the things, we teach people how to do is to create this calm space, and you create it with your child or children, or whoever, because you really want them to own everything in it, be something really great for them. And I did this with my own children, and we did it for months. We like picked everything out. I mean, it was just a corner. It wasn't even like anything great, but we spent all this time, and then we practiced the breathing. We practiced when we would use it, and we practiced all the different tools, and we did it over and over. And then as soon as it was all ready, they never used it again. And I used it all the time. It was amazing. But what I noticed is they already knew all the techniques. They knew the breathing, they knew all the fidgets, they knew everything they wanted. And so when they wanted to calm down, they would just go to wherever they wanted to calm down, and they would use all the same strategies. They just didn't need to be in that space because we spent so much time talking about it and so much time practicing it that they had just kind of internalized their skills. So it was pretty cool and it worked. And then the biggest thing about self-regulation is to always pair it with positive self-talk. Because you could still be really mad at somebody and you could be ruminating on that. And so you really need to pair it with something positive as you're doing some breathing or whatever activity you're doing. And I always say too that, the two things you have with you at all times are your breath and your positive self-talk. So yes, fidgets and putty and kicking a soccer ball and all these other things are great if kids need to have that outlet and figure out what works for them. But at the end of the day, if they're standing there at the soccer, or they're on a baseball field, they're not going to be able to run off and, go play with their fidget. They're going to have to take their deep breaths, and they're going to need to say something positive. And it could be a simple, it's okay, I'm okay, or I got this, I just need to calm down, or whatever they want to say to themselves. But it has to be something that they build in themselves, for in those moments when, those are the things those are their internal tools they always have access to. And so, calm down exercises. I can provide lists if anybody wants, but basically, it's just what are kids into? Do some like to draw, some like to sing, some like to create music, make comics, like I said, run around, kick a ball. Do they need something external? Do they want to talk to somebody? Do they want to sit with their pets? It's figuring out multiple things that can help kids calm down, because they'll only work until then they don't work anymore. So you always want to have a bunch of tools and a bunch of different ideas. Take 5 was the one that I had mentioned. Lazy 8 is another one where they basically just do a figure 8 on their hand and they're just breathing in and breathing out. And so it's something, again, they can just have with them at all times, and they're very simple ones. And so it's fun to see kids come up with all sorts of different ones on their own. Okay, if there's no questions, the last one is really about giving ownership to our children about guiding and not solving their problems. So this is a lot, again, when I do a lot of work with our homeschool families and even in the schools with the school counselor is like getting kids to recognize where they're feeling, calming down, and now they have to get back to something. They have to go back to class. They have to get back to work. They have to get homework done. You know, even with my own kids, like they have to go to soccer practice. Like, here we go. We got to get back to it. And so we don't want to just tell kids what to do all the time because then we're sending the message that they can't handle this on their own, that they don't know what to do. We want to use open-ended questions and really get them to think about it. So we're trying to guide them, you know, if they have to go back and start work or something, like, what do you want to try? Do you want help or try something first? Do you want, you know, do we need to problem solve? Maybe it was a conflict with the sibling. Do we need to problem solve something? What might help you right now? And if they're like, I don't know where to begin. Would you like some ideas? But don't lead with those ideas. You want to try to get them to come up with the ideas. It builds their confidence. It shows them it's okay. You don't have to get it right the first time. We'll find other ways. There's more than one way to solve any problem. And so we'll just start with something. We have a growth mindset. If it doesn't work, we'll just try something else. It just didn't work yet. And so we're building that problem solving, that confidence, and that independence that they feel comfortable starting something, even if they're not sure if it's going to work out. All right. And then lastly, I was just going to talk about the Rotary partnerships that we have had with our local schools. So our counselor educator bundles, which include these games, there's junior games for the olders, and then there's younger mini games on the next slide. And we have some small group curriculums that build overall emotional intelligence and then specifically ones for friendship and social skills. So in the Carlsbad Unified School District, there are 9 elementaries and 3 middle. Thank you to Carlsbad High Noon Rotary. And then in Poway, we have 27 elementary schools and 1 middle who are using it. And that's through Rancho Bernardo Rotary, and our district mental health Rotary group has also sponsored that. And so they use them individually with students. They use them in counseling, small counseling groups, whole classes use them. And then also they support our IEP goals, our kids. And so the special ed teams like school psychologists and speech pathologists, besides the school counselors, are also using them, which is really great. And they build the self-regulation, the communication skills, friendship, social skills, and overall confidence and motivation. And so the schools and the counselors are sharing, they've seen improved emotional regulation, they have better relationships with their peers and social skills, they can focus, and it's really been helpful to help, meet those IEP goals. So we're looking at the overall, the schools for school and the schools for life. It helps, everything kind go a little bit more smoothly. And this is more information about us and where to find everything parenting EQ. So thank you so much. If there's any questions or comments.
Amy, great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great.
So the question I have is, so could you explain how the Carlsbad and the Poway clubs are participating?
So they received the counselor bundles. So these are like the mini games here and the junior games. And so they each got both mini and junior games, so 10 total games. And then they have the small group curriculum. So technically there's 4 of them because there's 2 for the younger grades, emotional intelligence and social skills and friendship, and 2 for the older. And so they're using them this way. They're running small groups with them. They're using them like the counselors usually have to do classroom lessons. So they're using them in class lessons and then with individual students.
So that day, the Rotary clubs they funded the purchase of those kits.
Right. So 10 kits cost.
What was it?
Ballpark.
They're-
I mean,
They're
about
like
$200, $250 per kit for counselors, I think it was.
yeah, I think it was like 250 a kit. I know.
Yeah, our club, they did it over 2 years. We worked with Amy. We identified the first, say, 10 or 12 schools and wanted to check to see what kind of impact it had, whether it had positive impact or not. We are Rotarians after all. Uh, and then it was a very positive reaction. And that's when the some of the counselors in the special ed classes and asked for expanding the scope a little bit, not just for the counselors, but for the special ed teachers, for the group sessions there as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. We did the same at Carlsbad, Dave. So we got it to all our elementary schools. I mean, we started out in middle school, and middle school was fine, but I don't think it was quite the fit. The better fit was at elementary school. And what's
Yeah.
interesting is I still hear more and more people around the educational space talk about the fact that they need more help at the elementary schools.
Hmm.
That's where they're really looking for the help. They actually it just came up last week again, and this was from um, the the superintendent. It was saying, people are really much more concerned right now at the elementary level than they are later on, which surprised me because that's where we thought most of the issues were. But they're all starting or they're all seeing it, of course, first of all, at the elementary level.
Hmm. Which is good. I mean, if they build it there, it's going to be better all the way up. So, and these work better because there's so many. So we call them like tier one, tier two, and tier three. So tier one is like everybody gets in the classrooms, a school counselor for the most part, or somebody else will come in and teach like these, talk about feelings and how do you calm down and all that kind of stuff. And then you have our tier two kids who need a lot more support, and so those kids go into small groups. And so that's why these games and activities and the curriculum, it's all ready for them to go into small groups. And then you have the tier three, which is they get individual help or they get referred out. And so in the middle school, I didn't run as many groups in middle school. I did academic groups more than these social groups because there's a lot of kids aren't going to be as open and willing to come as much in middle school. It has to be phrased kind of a little bit different. Where the elementary, the kids love coming to these little groups and, they just want to play games and activities. And so that's why for the olders, one, it's for a little bit younger age group. But second of all, the kids who do need it are not really as engaged with it. They usually just do the one-on-one.
Mm.
That's what I found. So,
So
So
help me also understand how we can, so for example, Escondido School District, you've got the elementary school district, somewhat unique.
mhm.
Um, what would be the process to get, are they just sitting there going, boy, if we could only get it, if we could only get somebody to pay for it, we'd be happy? Or is it, you know, okay, we've got these other two things that we've committed money to and we aren't getting off of them? What's the sort of sales process like?
Yeah, and so I have a friend who's a social worker in that district, and I'd have to go back and look. I feel like she said so everybody's doing some type of social emotional learning,
Mhm.
school wide or within the classrooms or whatever. And I don't know if they were doing the Incredible Years or they were doing a program. And then I thought that she also said they might be doing small groups based on that same program. But things change all the time, and I don't know what the funding or if that program has phased out. Like I don't know what that looks like. I could also, I think she's still there, follow up with her again to see because I had mentioned it to her, and I remember that they were doing something already. But it would be back to like the school counselors. Hey, what are you using for small groups, or what is your special ed using for to basically meet some IEP goals for social skills and stuff? And those might be people who would be interested. So I appreciate
Yeah,
that. And I can
Yeah.
follow up and see.
but we
yeah,
got, I know both all the superintendents and stuff are Rotary members in one club or another,
Oh,
and there's we have teachers in our club. And anyway, the so is there a certain grade that they typically focus? Because I know there are a lot of programs in elementary school. It's like, okay, we do this in third grade.
mhm.
We start this in third grade. Do you have, recommend or just you want them to do it starting in kindergarten?
I would say that my bundles are best probably suited for K through like fifth grade. Sometimes it can go sixth grade depending, but it depends on if their middle school is sixth grade. If their elementary is sixth grade, then that works. But K through 5 is what these are really great for small groups.
Thanks.
Yeah, Dave, I think also Escondido is a good candidate, just like Poway was and Carlsbad. It's a smaller school district, so it's somewhat easier to connect without all the politics. And so I
Oh,
think
they have plenty of politics. I got their share. It's the only school district that has that elementary and high school have their own, they can't get along, so they have their own school districts.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, the point, as you said,
Yeah.
there's a lot of Rotarians of contacts in there already, so that's definitely I see that being more potential, because, for example, than the likes of trying to get San Diego School District to adopt it, because a council may want to do it, but they have to run it up the ladder, and it takes forever to get anything going. So I think that's why I think the smaller cities are around the periphery of San Diego is perfect for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amy, one thing that you haven't talked about today, but in the past you've talked about going to places like Alaska and helping with the homeschooling and people like that. So uh, that's you're really helping the parent there to work directly with the child, aren't you? In that context, rather than a big group setting or anything like that.
Right. So what I've done this, so initially when I first met you, Alan, and I showed you all those boxes that I had for individual parents. So we've kind of morphed and changed, and now I have a full 36-week, 100 and something lessons. It's called a scripted open and go curriculum for homeschool families. And so instead of just, and it includes all of these games, and it includes like 6 books and all these other activities. And now it's like if somebody wants to introduce this, like as long as they're doing their math, their science, their English, and they are recognizing they need to build this foundation, they can do this a couple times a week, and it can last the whole, if they do school like roughly 9 months or so, it can last the whole time. They can space it out, they can do it as much or as little as they want. So that's been my focus in Alaska, because they're so remote. People really can't make it to the schools, and so they are a huge homeschool community. And so now that's been my focus this last year, really.
So does that work? Uh, as you can tell by the age group in this, we're not immediate parents of young children. Our children are much older now, but as grandparents, is that a toy, a tool that can be used for grandparents to read to and entertain the children?
It
Eh,
absolutely can. It's pretty robust at the moment. I mean, if a grandparent was interested and because there's books and there's these games, and they don't have to do the whole thing if they don't want to. And it has a whole guide. It tells you, here's how to introduce it, here's what to say, here's what you're looking for as far as answers. My next mission is to piece it apart and make it a little bit more bite-sized if people just want to buy different sections of it. But right now, the whole thing is kind of geared for somebody to buy the curriculum for the year and then kind of roll it into what they're already doing. But
yeah.
it could be.
I'm talking as a grandparent. My first grandchild was born 4 weeks ago. So,
Oh, congrats. Oh my gosh.
So
Well, maybe you gotta wait a few years.
yes, indeed, indeed.
I would like to add on, that brief discussion about homeschooling. So, Amy, I was in education for many years and still work at Grossmont High School, volunteer every week with
Oh, nice.
wonderful young people. But homeschooling has always been a circumstance where sometimes parents are protecting or hiding issues, and we saw this with the recent shootings. The parents just needed more help than, and that's a bigger discussion too. So how much is that homeschooling package you referred to at this time?
So my whole curriculum is 425. 425. It includes shipping, and it comes. I can show you real quick if you wanted to see. Um, and there's two age levels. Let me see if I can. Oops.
So, if any of your with your connection involvement with the schools, homeschooling is sometimes, in many ways, a combination where the students do a lot of their work at home, but they come to the school part time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, if a school, so you want to answer that question that I didn't even know how to phrase to you? That
Yes.
combination can how
Yes, like the
just talk about
hybrid
it.
model. Yes. So, and I've had teachers buy this, and so they use it in their school. Like people are using it all sorts of different ways. But so, for instance, for parents or for the homeschool, they can do this as much or as little. It's set up that they can do it once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, or once every couple weeks. It really depends how they want to do it. So it comes with these. This is the younger one, ages 4 to 7. It comes with these 6 books. It comes with all the games that were in the bundles, and it comes with these activities, the feeling puppets and stuff. And then there's 9 units, and they each have 8 core lessons and then 4 enrichment lessons. So here's like a sample of what the whole thing looks like. So it's all the activity. What do you need? Here's how you discuss it in the family, and here's how you roll it out. So yes, it can be done in a hybrid model. It can be done, once a week. You can just take out the first book and start reading it, and then the next week you can play a game. I basically, we've done it for multiple, ways that kids learn. So anybody who has any kind of challenge, maybe some people really learn by doing art, and there's art involved in it. Some is like walking outside, some is reading the book, some is playing the game. There's a junior level that has a workbook so they can do independent things. So here's like the junior level, same thing. It comes with 6 different books. It's all chunked into very like bite-sized. Here's how you introduce the concept. Here are the topics. So it can be used. It's very flexible, let's put it this way. And so I have heard people using it, yeah, just when the kids come in and they do it like once a week as kind of like a social emotional lesson. Parents are doing it a couple times a week, or they're picking and choosing. Hey, we really need, I always say start with self-awareness and self-regulation because that has to be built, but then go to social skills, or then come back to communication, and so whatever the kid needs. When we talked in our presentation about how do you know what behavior looks like and then what skill is underneath, once you identify that skill, then you just start teaching it, if that makes
In any of your programs, do you include, I want to say exercising, but is probably a better word, of parents walking with their children and talking?
Yes, yes. We definitely, I mean, there's like even a mindful scavenger hunt. And I mean, there's all sorts of different ways. We do bring, like I said, art into it. We're trying to there's physical, there's get up and move and do stuff. There's especially the littles, the 4 to 7 age.
Yeah.
It's all hands on, it's all interactive, it's all game based and play based. And then the older ones, they're reading some of these books, but they're all chapter books. So you can read them together, or they can read the chapters separate and then you can talk about it. And then you do pages in the worksheet. But it always ends with a reflection, because I feel like reflection is the most underutilized parenting skill ever. What we always talk about, like if something happens, we just kind of want to get through the moment. We don't want to go back and talk about it again. And those are those valuable times of like what worked really good, and so let's capitalize. And then what didn't work, but what could you do differently next time? Because now your lid's back on
Yeah.
and you can think about it logically. So then you make a plan. So next time I'm upset, I want to practice this calming strategy or whatever. And so then that next time you can introduce it that way. And so there's always a reflection piece to like come back to, okay, what did you learn? What's your takeaway? What are you going to do differently next time? Because that's really the heart of kids
That's
learning.
how it sticks. Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
the next question, and my last comment, I guess, would be using the libraries. I don't know what that means. I mean, there's lots of books on parenting,
Yeah.
but have you with your knowledge, skills, and wonderful ideas and ways of parents helping their young people.
Mhm.
Are you, are you going to write a book? How can you get in the libraries or even the school libraries? I don't know.
Yeah. So, Alan, we talked about this a lot when we were trying to think about how to introduce those original parent boxes and having the counselors buy them. The big thing is the consumables. And so, of course, the books are all reusable, but like this journal here, there's the kindness cards, there's this unworry book, you're writing directly in them. And so they're not, there's a mix of it of things that are consumables. And so that's the hard part as far as what can
Yeah.
I do for the library. But you did bring up a good point. I did write a book. It is my kinder readiness. This is not for homeschool families. This is for parents of kids like basically going to kindergarten. And it comes with our feeling puppets because everybody loves the feeling puppets and this little calm caterpillar, which is it's just a what's called a keychain to remind the kids at school. They put it on their backpack so they remember the skills. But I did write this book. I'm going to kindergarten. And so if I didn't include, maybe the puppets, or maybe they could probably, I don't know that the puppets would ever make it back. The kids love the puppets, but that's kind of the challenge right now is that, could these be checked out and returned? So much of it is consumables. So I
Yeah.
don't know. But thank you. I have definitely thought about the library system. It's a good idea.
Well, thank you for a great
That's
presentation. Yeah.
yeah, it
Yes,
was
thank you
fantastic.
all. Great questions.
Any other questions?
Probably got 3 hours worth, but no.
All right, with that, I'm going to end the recording and then we can carry on with the meeting if we like.
I'll bring up another topic after the microphone is off. I mean, not that it has to be,